Thank you all for attending my talk today. You're probably wondering why is Thanos hovering up and down on this front slide. This is a themed presentation, so you'll get a lot of bespoke, artisanal, locally sourced, handcrafted images to do with the Avengers. The reason why it's Avengers is every year in Columbus they have a conference held at a movie theater with the release of a movie. And I like to play to the audience as much as possible. And for the movie, we had Avengers the last 2 years, and so I used an Avengers-themed presentation for it. So this is a most excellent opportunity for you to see some handcrafted PowerPoint. So today we're going to be talking about how to automate strategically and tactically from a test automation perspective. I think this ties in nicely with the last presentation, where it was very much focused on the tactics of delivering on your CI/CD pipeline. So we're going to talk a little bit more in depth in terms of like what can we overall look at strategy-wise, as well as some examples, tactics, that doesn't really say one area or one particular path is the best one. We do so talking a little bit about framework and tools that you can use, the challenges that are commonly associated with test automation, how can you schedule it in place, what are some metrics you can follow. Don't worry, that's dropped at the end for the appendix because no one likes math. A little bit about myself I work for Designer Brands. I've worked there since May. Previously to that, I worked at Huntington National Bank. Before IT, for a decade, I was a research scientist. I traveled around to various universities giving them massive amounts of money. Eventually, they gave me pieces of paper, and I used that to go into IT. I'm also a huge fan of board games. I own over 2,000 board games. My favorite game is Diplomacy. I travel around the world to play it. It is known as the destroyer of friendships. That's the reason why I have to travel around the world to play Diplomacy. I'm also an evangelist for Ruby Cucumber. It's the sort of automation tool set of choice, I think, in the Columbus, Ohio area. It's one that I like, at least the domain-specific language. And it's something that I'm going to show you in a few examples today, but not say that this is really the answer. I also have an adorable cartoon family. They are actually real. This is just the cartoon formats for them. A wife and 2 kids. They take up the majority of my time now as opposed to board games or science or IT. So a little bit of background. Let's level set. Just like the last presentation, we'll start with a couple of definitions where we say strategy and tactics. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, for strategy, that's a plan of action or a policy that we have to achieve an overall goal. Whereas the tactics are the actual art of implementing it, achieving some end with whatever you have available to you. For example, Star-Lord, he had an excellent strategy for defeating Thanos, but his own emotional tactics cost his team the win, and Thanos ended up snapping half the galaxy. To go to where we are now, let's start and look back in the past. Oftentimes we have a habit of thinking about our problems as being something that's brand new. This is something that's been around in terms of how do we automate strategically or tactically, or how do we best use our testing efforts. It's been around for many decades. We go back in time to Internet Explorer 6. For those of you who are in your early 20s, you've never had to account for developing or testing around Internet Explorer 6, you are very lucky. It sucked. Microsoft, they had a great challenge in that they had many different variations of internet browsers and operating systems with which to support. You compound that by 26 different language binaries. You compound that by the various services that they offered for companies in terms of compatibility as well. So this is taken of what their testing matrix looked like from 2004. Way too many combinations for someone to reasonably test or to have a team testing, even though they are probably the most valuable company in the world at the time. So what did they do? How did they solve this problem, even if you're going to use automation to test these combinations? Well, the way that they solved it is they identified various buckets, so-called personas, what we consider today, of what common customers would look like. And they tested according to those personas and then applied them to what they would consider to be the rest of the combinations and say, we reasonably expect this to work. For Internet Explorer, often did not work, but that was more based upon the browser itself. But that's just to give you a little bit idea that the challenges they faced in terms of the combinations very much apply to today. Today, when we look at that, we do care about browser OS device combinations. Now it's primarily devices if we're testing, say, mobile applications because the market is so fractured. But overall, across decades of using test automation, it's always promised the same thing. We're going to save time, and we're going to lower costs while raising quality. Seemingly something that is impossible, oftentimes something that is not delivered. So how do we actually implement test automation, associate it with our tech stack and our processes and our people, and make sure that it's something that's successful? So we all are encountering challenges. Oftentimes I'll ask the audience for some feedback. So I'll provide one because I like to get things off my chest in terms of trouble we've had. Recently with my company that we had an issue where an outside vendor was delaying on their delivery of the product. It wasn't dev complete. So what do we end up doing? What do we end up cutting? We don't have to have unit test coverage for them to deliver it. Oh no. What about you? Anything else that someone wants to share? You can speak about loud so we don't have to use the microphone, of an issue you've had associated with test automation. We're all friends here. You feel free to share.
What was that? Undocumented return code.
Great for testing, great for looking down through and trying to figure out what the problem is. Oftentimes I see some of the common challenges associated with automation relate to actually like the implementation thereof. If we don't make it something that's part of the life cycle, or we just decide to choose a tool set. The tool set possibly determined by like a prior manager or management structure that people are forced to use because they've signed a contract. These are all common issues, but the overall goal in terms of like what automation promises has always remained the same, in that at a certain point for an application that you are supporting, it becomes so large that you don't have the amount of time that you need to test it appropriately, and quality ultimately drops. And if you bring about some form of automation at a certain point in time, then great. You'll actually end up saving that time because you'll be able to have greater test coverage, you'll have greater a quicker feedback loop, and you'll be able to figure out where your problems are and address them more quickly. And you can eventually move to what we have today with a lot of CI/CD pipelines where you've got validations from unit, integration tests, security scans, perf testing, functional testing, before you're actually confident it can deploy to production. But in practice, this is actually much more difficult than setting up and pressing play. In terms of automation strategy, what do we mean when we say overall strategy? So these are areas of concern that you need to think about, you need to document and have as an upfront for your organization, rather than just saying, we're buying a tool, go ahead and automate everything. You need to consider what the scope of your testing is. What are your actual objectives you're hoping to reach for an application, for a project, for a company? What is the approach you're going to take to actually deliver it within the teams? What are the framework and tooling you're going to select? What sort of environment you have to actually work in terms of the people? And in terms of scheduling, like how does it actually fit in to execute for your expectations for, say, we want to have deployment in 3 to 4 minutes, or we want to have deployment every single sprint, or we want to have quarterly deployment. Let's start off with the approach. What I find to be most reasonable is to prep people with a common set of questions or checklists. So this was pulled from one of the checklists I use for people who are explicitly on the team. So this is just to get them in the habit of making consideration of, is this something that we should automate? Is it something that's highly repeatable? Is it a repetitive task? Is it prone to human error? Is it something where we can have control of our data and environment? So having a sort of checklist that you can prompt people with, make sure that everyone is making a very similar decision regardless of what team they are on. At my prior company, I had a team of 8, and we supported 73 different applications, 40 of which were web, but it was also desktop, database, mainframe. How do we actually set up so we have a universal set of standards across the entire enterprise? Well, having checklists like this will help people at least have the idea of, yeah, we can actually automate this. This is something that is a good candidate, and it's something that I recommend you use as well. But one of the things that's not considered about in terms of how we're going to implement automation are the costs associated with it. Development code and automation code are both code. So every time you commit to writing test scripts, whether that is a unit test, integration test, or functional test, you are committing to maintaining that code. So that is the risk at which you're taking. So you have to automate wisely. You just can't try to automate everything, the so-called automation fire hose. So you need to take into account the maintenance costs, as well as costs of updating documentation, the training and onboarding, OS upgrades, language upgrades. This is an additional code base that you then have to support. It doesn't matter whether you're saying or having your developers do it, or your test automation developers do it, or people you've converted over and brought in to help out with automation. You are committing to supporting that code as soon as you write it. So when you're writing that test automation, you better be sure that it's going to be something that's valuable and going to provide good return on investment. This cost needs to be baked into your overall cost for any automation effort. You have additional constraints from an organizational perspective. I've seen this on a single team. I've seen it in supporting an entire enterprise, that they want the world. Like, we want to have everything in our regression automated. They'll just say, we've got 15,000 test cases, automate it all. That's not really the way you can actually approach things, because they're not going to stop all work to do that. No, we have to consider what sort of the restrictions we have in terms of project delivery, what project budget that we have available, and what's the technical skill set of the people we have within our organization. So twice now at a couple different companies I've gone into, they've had zero test automation. All their testers, quality people, were all manual. So they needed to be trained how to code, which is very difficult to do when they're also expected to deliver their project level work. So that's a concern you have to make that's upfront. You want to focus, instead of automating everything, specifically on things that have high chance of failure, critical, legal issues that you have to make, something that would cost your company a great deal if you did not have that test automation coverage around it. That's the approach that you need to take, is realizing within your organization, what can we actually do with this constraint, the so-called guardrails that you have to identify and work with. You can't expect the world. You can expect to make that sort of iterative incremental improvement, though. One of the ways in which I help try to direct my teams that I support in what should they automate is to use a value ranking system. And here I've taken out the values and instead put in checkbox. So say for a set of features we're going to ideally develop for a project, or story cards that are being pulled down, we want to have a series of items that we want to rank it by. What is the criticality of it? Do we have legal concerns? Do we have control over data and environment? Highly reusable. In this case, I want to try to create a ranking system for our potential automation scripts on a scale from 0 to 100. So that way, within the time that we are given, we can start at the most highly rated, as in those closest to 100, and work our way down. Anything that we've missed because we've run out of time or we're limited in the people we have available, that can become technical debt from an automation perspective. This way, we automate the most valuable items first. Your set that you want to use in terms of criteria should be based upon your own company's profile. Me previously working for a big bank, we cared about SOX compliance greatly. We also cared about ADA compliance because we'd been sued. So those were higher ranking in terms of providing more points than some of the other concerns of reuse or is it on the critical path. So these are the things that we care about, and these are the things that you should as well in creating your own sort of automation scorecard that you can use. And I should also mention, when you're taking concern from an organizational perspective, oftentimes upper management will take the opinion of how can we cut people? How can we reduce staffing? I've had that happen numerous times at numerous conferences as well. They try to figure out how they can reduce the number of people working for them. That's not the point of automation. Good test automation is supposed to enhance testing as a tool rather than replacing people. It's not supposed to replace the testing activity itself. It's just supposed to help it. Your good test automation should also be something that is valuable, that when you actually receive a report, you have good confidence that something is really wrong rather than you just having flaky tests that execute. You want to have a good high signal to noise ratio. If you get alerts and they don't actually mean anything because on one day it could be good, another day it could be bad because of our environment, then people will stop caring about your automation. So good test automation be something that's reliable and informative for your stakeholders. So what sort of framework and tools should you use? This is my sort of like weasel way of saying there is no one set of framework or tools you should use. It's really based upon your organization. What I have used in the past and use now with another set of tools has been often Ruby Cucumber, and that's something that can be used more typically with web applications, and most of a lot of test automation people have focused on are on web and mobile space, but it's something that you want to have a framework and tool that's flexible enough to handle your entire tech stack. So as I said, I had to support web, mobile, desktop, database, mainframe, services, so the entire sort of gamut of applications. So you want to have a tool that fits in with your company's profile. So in this case, I've liked Ruby Cucumber because I want to also have something that's shared for the entire team, that sort of shared understanding and in a language that everyone can understand, whether they're technical or not. And so using the top layer as plain English is one way in which I could accomplish that. But if you're selecting your tool, one way you could go is looking, say, open source. And here's just a single example. So Selenium, by far the most popular tool used for web automation, used with a number of different implementations across languages, so Java being the primary one. And this goes into my actual recommendation. As close as possible, what you want to do is try to align your test automation, we're talking about functional tests in this case, with your development code base. You want to reduce your tech stack as much as possible to make it so that not just your testers, but your developers can and should be writing this code so they can actually live potentially within the same code base. This makes it easier for people to transition to make test automation part of their day-to-day. It makes it very visible for them and makes it clear when you have execution, if you have failures, how to fix it. And it also reduces the amount of time you'd have to take in training people. So anytime you can try to align any test automation tools with your current tech stack, you should do so. In terms of what you should actually do in terms of writing your test automation, the goal should not be to really maintain the automation, as in devoting too much time in the automation. What you want to do is make things as reusable as possible. This goes into just simple development practices that we've agreed upon for the last 20 plus years in terms of using do not repeat yourself or KISS, keep it simple, stupid. The challenge that I've seen, though, is a lot of people who are not originally developers, these are people in the testing space who are first learning to develop, like they don't have that sort of knowledge base, as in they don't know that perspective for how they take it. And so they'll get in the habit of just writing as many scripts as possible and not using good developer practices of, hey, using something like modules or reusable code that we can have. In terms of Ruby Cucumber that I gave an example of, we want to make our steps as reusable as possible. An example would be, the user clicks insert name here, where it can click any sort of object on the page, which you could also use tap for mobile, and you can click and tap on any object on a mobile device. So you reduce the amount of time they actually have to spend building up this infrastructure code. And then what this naturally leads to is once you have these sort of code Legos put in place, these imperative steps that are very UI driven, you can encapsulate those into declarative statements to talk about what the user's overall aim is. I don't want to go through 10 steps to describe how the user is logging into the application if I want to get to the point of them actually converting. I can instead wrap those 10 steps into a single step of given the user is logged into the application as insert name of here user. Just makes it easier for me, focuses the people on testing activities rather than writing that support code. In terms of integration testing as well as unit testing, this is an absolute requirement. This is more important than those functional tests you have. One, because they provide quicker feedback for you. Two, they integrate in with your existing systems. And three, they can be easily added to any build pipeline. So you should absolutely leverage unit integration tests. And if you had a priority, unit test number one. Fastest feedback you could possibly get, the most reliable that you could possibly have. You have a host of unit test frameworks that you can leverage for it, regardless of what your code base is. It should be upfront as a deliverable, something that is required, and push back if people are saying, we don't have time to unit test. Show them why. Attach defects that have been escaped to production to, if we had a unit test here, we would have caught it. That way, if you provide that sort of financial incentive of, it cost us this much to fix it, you can show them it's important as an upfront concern. There are a lot of challenges that you face. There's many different ways to do test automation wrong, only a few really to do it right or right for that time. One of those challenges that I've seen once I've helped people train them or at other companies is when they get a hold of a tool, they want to use it everywhere. Like everything looks like a nail when you're a hammer. And that's the approach that they take. Just because you can automate something does not mean that you should automate it. Use this automation scorecards. Use those checklists for feasibility that you have to make sure that people are only automating the things that are most valuable, the things that are on the critical path, the things that are going to cause you legal trouble if you don't actually have good test coverage in that place. So avoid that sort of automation fire hose. Another concern that people have is, well, they'll write it and the test will pass for that environment or before a refresh occurs, and then it'll fail thereafter. You should be writing automation that is worthwhile across all environments and has control over data. If you lose control over either one of those things, you're going to have a lot of flaky failures, which means you're going to have to do a lot of rework, which means that people are going to stop also believing in the results of your tests because, oh, they failed here because the environment was down, or, oh, they did a refresh and I don't have control over it anymore. They're going to just stop looking at it, period, or waiting for you to have one clean run. Make sure every run is clean by controlling your data and your environment. Another space where you have it is those flickering tests. So you have tests that will pass, you run it again, fail, run it again, pass, off and on, flickering. This is something that's going to defeat the purpose of automation and having something that's reliable and informative. What instead you want to do is remove those flickering tests. Just first and foremost, take them out. That is automation technical debt that you've identified. Then you want to do a failure analysis. Why is it failing? Is it because of the aforementioned data environment, a crappy application? Is it because your actual test code? Far be it from me to say, oh, you've actually wrote poor code, but yes, it does happen. That you need to fix that code, but you need to pull those out because every run that you should send through should be something to inform your stakeholders about the state of the application. If it informs them that your automation is having trouble, then you've missed your purpose. So pull those flickering tests out, solve them, or just remove them altogether, because it could be the case that that just shouldn't be an automated test. What else do you have that's a problem? Well, long tests. Especially I see with a lot of people who are using Gherkin-based test automation, that they'll have a test that is 300 lines long. At a certain point, your eyes glaze over and you have no idea what the actual purpose of the test is. Just a functional test, similar to an integration test, similar to a unit test, should ideally be testing one thing, like have one outcome that you're focused on. And it should be as short and readable as possible. So you should take away and pull out all those extra validations that potentially occur. Wrap up all those user path and clicking in, selecting that can occur. Make it as short and simple as possible, focused on a single outcome. So that way the users understand when they get to see, all right, this is the results of my test when you send it off to the rest of the development team or your business stakeholders. They understand where it failed, why it failed. And if it was all passing and all green, that it's looking good and they have confidence in that. So take away those long tests. Another area of concern is the shaky foundation. This is where people get a new tool, or maybe they're working with a legacy application in terms of test automation. They're not making concerns for the people who are going to use it 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. They're going to put it in to get it done for today, that we delivered this card today. That often leads to you throwing away your automation suite after a few years. At my very first company, they did this on a massive scale. We were talking tens of thousands of people working there, hundreds of automation suites. None of them lasted. That's because every team did it their own way. They never made design concerns that would be something that could be extensible or maintainable. And eventually, every one of the suites thrown away for something new. And now eventually, they've switched off entirely from the tool set into another one because they didn't have good feedback in terms of, does this actually provide value for us in terms of the state of the application? So make good design decisions as an upfront. The same way you'd want to have good design decisions made for the actual application under test. So another one of those is actually following up and keeping up with development. Your test automation should be concurrent with your development. So that means fundamentally changing your SDLC. So it should be something that you're writing as you're writing the development code, or ideally even before you do. If you can have your development code and test automation code together in one, we're talking about functional tests here, then it should be living in the development suite. And you should be writing those first so that you slowly deliver on those acceptance criteria. You use that automation feasibility as an upfront to determine, yes, we're impacted for this card or for this requirement if you're waterfall, and actually write that at the same time and not have a delay. But how do you actually implement it? How do you put it into your schedule? So that's one of the challenges that I face. Getting people to change their habits is the most difficult of all. Like getting budget, okay, we can get that, but getting people to change how they actually work is a challenge. One of those ways in which we've addressed that is bringing in example mapping. This was originally designed by Matt Wynn as a form of BDD for discovery, formulation, and finally automation of those requirements. How do you actually do it? Well, you start with a story or a requirement. You have representatives of the team, similar to like a Three Amigos or a specification workshop, or your business analyst, developer, tester, product owner. For that single story, you're going to first define on those blue cards the business rules, the acceptance criteria. Think of this as the business logic the developers are going to take with them. For each piece of business logic, you want to have at least one scenario. This is going to be the functional test that your automation tester is going to take with them and implement. And for every question that those folks in the room cannot answer, you're going to write it down on those red cards. At the very end of the session, you will have a good idea of whether you're actually ready to begin work on that story or not, as well as a shared understanding. Those examples become those automation scenarios. Those business rules end up becoming your integration and unit test, depending upon how finite you've made those business rules. And those red cards provide the team the flexibility to say, we're not going to begin work until you answer these questions. They really help out the team understand what our coverage should be, that you actually have good coverage, and that you've implemented the business rules that fit the story. And there's a lot of mnemonics you can use to help drive you in this session. So one of those is too many red cards. Development work is not ready. I reject this story until we get those answers. Too many business rules under a given story. That's way too dense of a story. We need to split it apart into 2 or more stories so it's easier for the developers to implement. Too many examples under a given business rule. That's way too dense a business rule. Let's break that apart into 2 or more rules so that way we can actually understand the functionality we're about to deliver. That's why they use color coding in this scheme. And that's why they empower the team to give a simple thumbs up, thumbs down, whether they think they're ready to begin or not. And this is one way, if you make this an upfront for whether or not we're going to begin work, that you actually put it in place. Here's an example of an example map where I get very meta, where it's an example map about scheduling a workshop about example mapping, where you have requirements that you're expecting. Hey, it has to be held during normal business hours as my business rule. But what exactly are normal business hours? Well, I have an example for that, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I have requirements of, well, attendance, like it has to actually be attended for you to host that workshop. Well, I want to see some examples of where I need to hold it. If it's 4 more people, we can just do that out in the lobby. If we got more than that, we need to be in a big room here. And other important questions like, should catering be required for every workshop? Yes. All right, the last section I'm going to talk about here is standards. So if we've implemented it and we have it scheduled into our daily work, how do we maintain those standards? Well, there's a couple different activities, ceremonies if you will, that you use to make this real. One of those is a regression review, where of all the automation you've written, you want to have the team understand and be in agreement that this reflects the current state of the application. The way you do it is you bring together those stakeholders in the team, whether it's your application manager, members of your development, quality staff, as well as people who are working prod support, people who are in operations. And you have them review all those tests that have been added. Prod support is going to provide data to you. We're doing this based upon evidence, not based upon feelings. Where did we have the most issues? Because I want to focus my test coverage around where we're having the most problems. You have the business analysts come in and they're going to provide their feedback on what is actually something that's going to be driving revenue for us. And you get together in one room and you decide for that given release, if you're working on sprints or you're working on quarterly, even if you're doing daily, you want to gather up all the stories you've delivered and push to production and have in common agreement for that regression review that yes, these tests reflect the current state of the application. They should be added in part of our core regression that gets run nightly, daily, after every build. And these ones no longer reflect the current state. We're going to yank those out. So that way, that living documentation you promised is actually delivered. There's a few other areas in which you can add in that rigor to make your test automation more viable. This is Martin Fowler as a superhero. He's my superhero. I'm not a great programmer. I'm just a good programmer with great habits. So code reviews and refactoring. If our automation code is the same as development code, then we should require code reviews. So every test that we commit, unit, integration, functional test, should be code reviewed by a peer. You can do this even in larger groups, and this is what I recommend because this will help expand the knowledge of the entire team by sharing that, yes, every candidate that we've said we would do for this given feature is actually delivered, that it's understandable by the team, that even people who didn't work on that story could come in off the street and understand what you're actually doing here, that you've met all the standards that you've had for definition of done up to that given point, so that everyone is on board, understands, and you spread that knowledge that code reviews for test automation matters just the same as code reviews for your actual development code. You do the same thing with refactoring sessions, but you make them real by making them regular and giving responsibilities to specific people. So this is how you actually implement it. You identify, say for a given sprint or a given quarter, someone who's going to be your team leader. That's the person responsible for scheduling on a weekly basis or a factoring session. They're going to determine what the focus area could be. They're the one that's going to come up and bring in that data for the team to use. You also want to have an outside automation guide, someone not on the team, someone to provide an outside perspective who's used as an oracle. This is someone that can keep track of those session notes that you have, that can provide feedback and overcome obstacles for the team if they're struggling. And then the focus area can be something where, hey, it could be our code metric report, it could be a feature item that was worked on for that given sprint or that quarter, it could be something to do with a project release or just purely regression or reports we've had from Jenkins where we see, or logs that we've had. So it's something that we're focused on that actually directly reflects the team, such that we can report that the quality of our automation is always moving up, even though we're adding in more features. So in summary, if you're going to automate, your focus should always be unit tests first, followed by service level, followed by UI, followed by those end-to-end. They are all valuable, but if you have limited time, which we all do, unit tests are the most important. You want to build your automation based upon what the actual criticality of the path you're following, the likelihood of failure, the impact on your business, the complexity. Anytime you can pull away those highly redundant tasks, those tasks that are prone to human error, you are going to be providing value. It's important to also remember that budget, schedule, and technical skill set within your organization are always going to be a constraint for you. If you need to convert people over, then you're going to want to use a tool that they can actually benefit from, rather than a tool that you're going to have to fire a whole bunch of people or let them go and hire on a new set of people. Your automation should be something that is reliable, that's valuable, and provides that consistent feedback to your stakeholders, and most importantly, to the team, so that way they see value in engaging in those activities. So thank you all very much for your time. Open to questions.
So it is lunchtime, and lunch is well on its way, going on in the other room. However, if you do want to stay for Q&A for a couple minutes, it's up to you. Food for thought and food for body. You can get the food for your body later, too. And Tom, you'll be around.
I will be around
for the rest of the afternoon. Okay. Are there any questions?
So, in regards to the role of a QA engineer or people who automate functional tests, have you seen sort of a trend change in the recent sort of years as more automation, more CI/CD, the speed and delivery of code is so fast that if you want to develop functional tests alongside the developer writing code, do you see that role changing? Like the developer is basically becoming the QA person? Because otherwise, if the QA person in a waterfall method, he was engaged after the fact.
Yeah.
And now he has to be right alongside. Is that role changing?
Yeah, I would say, in general, from me, I attend many different conferences, and I've helped out a number of Fortune 500 companies, that their goal is always in trying to cut down on the number of people. So anytime they can have others in the team, polyskill, they will. One of those places is quality, and that's always because it's like end of the line, limited in terms of the time. And so what I like to have instead of a focus is, my preference is, all right, where are the areas outside of automation? Because testing is still valuable in terms of whether it's ADA testing, exploratory testing, that you want to find those areas where you actually do need that human intervention, but you do want to have it be a common skill set that can be shared amongst many people within the team, so that way you don't have any quote-unquote bottlenecks. So I've trained people from business side, actual traditional developers, people with zero coding experience, and for all of those individuals, I would say the ones with the easiest pickup is the development side, because they already know it's like shifting a programming language is just really for them shifting syntax. But the ones who've been most successful, in my opinion, are those actually had zero coding experience to begin with, who are given that as an upfront concern. And that is because they already had the standards in place, and you gave them as sort of a blank slate, like here's the standards you're going to follow, and they will. The expectation, though, is because of deliver fast. We want you to deploy a card and then 3 minutes later go to production. That you have to make quality an upfront concern, and identify it. If you're not able to get it done by the time it actually is deployed, identify it as technical debt. Otherwise, we know it just gets completely lost, and then it loses that value. So you have to show, and this is why it's like metrics portion of this, in case anyone wants this, is left at the very end on here. Of you have to show for the escape defects that this is causing a considerable cost for you in production in terms of downtime you have, in terms of lost revenue, that necessitates you taking this upfront concern of involving quality from the beginning. And that's really, I hate to be like very cynical about this, but that's really the only way you can switch management's mind, is to show them they're going to lose money unless they take a different approach.
What else? Oh,
So this, I understood, was mostly around the application testing, right? What are your thoughts about infrastructure testing? The infrastructure which is being laid down, like how do you go about testing it? What are the strategies for it?
Yeah, so that's one for the sake of time that I have to make certain cuts down. So in my current role, I have our DevOps team, everyone who's quality, and everyone who's in production support. And so it's similar things in terms of whether it's a execution report that you're going to get for functional tests, or we're talking about app dynamics alerts that come through. It's a signal to noise ratio. If you are getting alerts every single day, multiple times per day, you're going to stop caring. Because, oh, this is just an expected state. So when you do receive an alert, like, it should be something that actually matters. And so in terms of infrastructure testing, yes, I like to take as well an automation first approach with that, but I also like to limit the feedback that is provided to other members of the development team. So that way when they actually see something, it truly matters. And so in this case, it's just a suite of tools that are used as well to support the infrastructure. That's like the high level. I know it's sort of like a weasel answer for me to go into like specifics, but I could just provide like one additional example is that I'm monitoring every day through a number of different applications how many orders we have on those applications, and that's sent out hourly to everyone in IT. So what do you think the end result has been of that? We have an email rule that sends it to a folder, so you can have those 10,000 emails, and you don't actually see what's going on, versus like the one email that would be sent, say, during the day that summarizes everything that everyone would actually check out because it'd be something that'd be valuable. So similar thing with testing infrastructure is take that automation first approach. You have to have validations at each stage of your CI/CD pipeline. If you don't, then you're exposing yourself to risk.
and if I heard correctly too, the output, the result, the feedback has to be something that be consumed easily, like one email when there's issues per day, or maybe the roll up, something that people can get to. One more question. All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is about code reviews. Are there any strategies to prevent, a code reviewer's eyes just kind of glazing over and rubber stamping something, just to prevent any kind of burnout when doing code reviews, especially if a code review is particularly long or complicated?
Yeah, I would say I face this exact issue in that we required people through Azure DevOps to actually go through code review, as part of that push request. And what I was seeing from the results were some of these push requests were approved within 30 seconds. Now, I've not met a single developer in my life who could do a code review in 30 seconds outside of like, I'm just removing white space. And so what we did is added that second layer where we required a second reviewer, and we sent off the logs of the review time. And this is just, hey, little cop on the highway thing of we're not going to pull you over for speeding. It's sort of but we will check to make sure to encourage that. The other way in which we do it is require more than one other person to be there. So you have that sort of, all right, you've got other people watching you sort of agreement that we're going to be here to help each other out. Like, it's really for them to watch each other, but the way in which I portray it is, it's us to share knowledge, and it does share knowledge, but I want to make sure that they actually maintain that rigor rather than be like, yep, code review, I wheel my chair back over and I go back to what I was working on. Just making it part of the ceremony is important, so that way they know that they have to do it and it is valuable.
Thank you. One more time.